Welcome, dear traveler of the night. You've found your way to Mystic Bedtime Stories, a quiet sanctuary where ancient whispers find new life and forgotten dreams drift gently through the silence. This space is for you, for the part of you that longs to pause, to breathe, and to remember that there is still magic in the world, if only we slow down enough to hear it. Tonight, we begin not with headlines, not with to-do lists or calendars, but with something far older, a story that has lingered in the dust of ancient libraries, in the cracks of forgotten temples, and in the soft echoes of a name that has survived not through fact, but through feeling. That name is Aratta. You may never have heard of it. Few have. And yet, Aratta is one of the oldest names still whispered across the corridors of human memory. It comes to us from the world's first poems, etched into clay with delicate hands. Over 5,000 years ago. It is not a city you'll find on any modern map, but it lived and still lives in the oldest layers of imagination humanity has ever dared to write down. So let us step away from the noise now. Let the light dim. Let the rhythm of your breath slow with the rhythm of this ancient tale. You are safe here. You are held. And you are welcome. Tonight, we journey east of the known world, beyond the great cities of Sumer, Uruk, Eridu, Lagash, to a land described not by rulers or armies, but by poets and priests. They called it a land of gold, of lapis lazuli, of radiant temples and divine blessing. They called it the home of Inanna, goddess of love and war, of fertility and stars. They called it Aratta. What was it? A real kingdom buried beneath forgotten sands? A myth conjured to inspire devotion and awe? Or perhaps something deeper, a mirror held up to the human soul, reflecting our most sacred longings? That is what we will explore tonight, not through textbooks, but through stillness. Not through lecture, but through the soft unfolding of story. You don't need to take notes. You don't need to analyze. All you need to do is listen. Let your eyes grow heavy. Let the weight of the day slide off your shoulders. Let yourself begin to drift, not away, but within. Imagine, if you will, the land between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, the cradle of civilization, the place where writing was born, where humans first etched their thoughts into clay and called it memory. It is night in ancient Sumer. The stars hang heavy over the ziggurat of Uruk. Priests light oil lamps in the temple of Inanna, their flames flickering like the breath of the gods. Somewhere, a king stares eastward, beyond the horizon, beyond what is known, and dreams of a kingdom untouched by war, untouched by time, a kingdom of divine perfection. That kingdom is Aratta, and you, dear listener, are about to walk the same path that messengers once walked, across deserts, over mountains, past doubt and distance, toward something that cannot be fully seen, only felt. It sounds like a spell, like something remembered from a dream you can't quite place. And maybe it is, because this story, this journey, isn't just about an ancient myth. It's about you. It's about that quiet part of you that still believes there are places in the world and in yourself that are sacred, beautiful, and worth seeking. Tonight, we don't just tell the tale of Aratta. We become the tale, so lie back, breathe deeply. Let your thoughts float like boats on a calm river. You are not alone here. You are traveling with all who've ever wondered what lies just beyond the edge of the known. Together, we walk toward Aratta, not just a place, but a promise. A promise that even in a noisy, restless world, there are still stories that can quiet the mind, soothe the spirit, and awaken something ancient within us. Welcome to Mystic Bedtime Stories. Welcome to Aratta. In the beginning, there was mud. Rich, fertile mud between two rivers, waiting patiently for human hands to shape it into something miraculous. If you could float above this ancient land, like a bird riding the warm thermals of a summer evening, you would see the Tigris and Euphrates weaving their eternal dance across the landscape, their waters carrying life to a region that would become the birthplace of everything we now call civilization. But civilization is such a cold word, isn't it? It conjures images of rules and structures, of rigid boundaries between this and that. What happened in this land between the rivers was something far warmer, far more alive than our modern word can capture. What happened here was the first flowering of the human imagination when it finally learned to speak its dreams aloud and preserve them for all time. Picture yourself standing in this landscape at the very moment when night surrenders to dawn. The air is soft and cool against your skin, carrying the scent of river water and the promise of warmth to come. All around you, the flat expanse of the floodplain stretches toward horizons that seem impossibly distant, broken only by the occasional stand of date palms or the gentle rise of a tell where generations of human dreams have been built one upon another. This is Mesopotamia, though the people living here in those ancient days would not have recognized that Greek name. To them, this was simply the world, the place where the gods had chosen to plant the seeds of human possibility. Here, for the first time in our species' long journey, people began to live not just for the day that was, but for the days that might be. They began to imagine futures they could build, stories they could tell, legacies they could leave carved in clay for their children's children to discover. In the soft light of this ancient dawn, you can see smoke rising from the cooking fires of the world's first cities. Ur, with its massive ziggurat reaching toward heaven like a mountain built of human ambition and divine inspiration. Uruk, sprawling and vital, where the goddess Inanna held court, and where kings first learned to write their names with pride. Eridu, sacred Eridu, where the god of wisdom was said to have given humans the gifts of civilization itself. Cities, magnificent as they were never the whole story. The people who built them were dreamers as well as builders, poets as well as priests. They understood something that we sometimes forget in our rush toward progress, that the most important territories we explore are not always the ones we can map with our instruments and measure with our steps. Long before there were roads connecting these cities, there were stories. Long before there were merchants carrying goods from one market to another, there were songs carrying dreams from one heart to another. And among all the dreams that flowered in this fertile ground between the rivers, none captured the imagination quite like the dream of Aratta. If you listen very carefully in the quiet moments between one breath and the next, you can still hear the echo of those ancient voices. Sumerian words spoken in long halls lit by oil lamps, preserved on tablets of clay that somehow survived the rise and fall of empires, the turning of ages, the forgetting and remembering that marks the passage of human time. The Sumerians were the first people to write their thoughts down, but they were not the first people to think thoughts worth preserving. They were simply the first to believe that human words might be worthy of the same permanence that belonged to mountains and stars. When they pressed their wedge-shaped styluses into soft clay, they were doing something that had never been done before in the history of our planet. They were making the invisible visible, the temporary eternal. And what did they choose to make eternal? Not just their laws and their business transactions, though those survive as well. They chose to preserve their deepest longings, their most beautiful imaginings, their sense that somewhere beyond the horizon of the known world lay territories that existed as much in the heart as on any earthly plane. In those first poems, written in the world's first writing system, we find the first mention of a place that would haunt human dreams for millennia to come. A kingdom to the east, beyond mountains that caught the morning light like jewels scattered across the earth's dark fabric. A land where the goddess herself was said to dwell in splendor beyond imagination, where precious stones grew like fruit on celestial trees. where the very air shimmered with divine presence. They called this place Aratta, and in calling it, they created something that was perhaps more real than reality itself, a destination for the human soul when it grows weary of the limitations of the everyday world. The curious thing about Aratta, the thing that makes it so perfectly suited for our journey together tonight, is that it was always as much about the traveling as the arriving. The Sumerian stories that mention Aratta are not really about Aratta at all. They are about the kind of people who would dare to seek such a place, about the transformations that occur, not when we reach our destination, but when we commit ourselves completely to the journey in the growing light of this ancient morning. You might imagine yourself as one of those early dreamers, standing on the flat roof of a house in Uruk, looking eastward toward mountains that rise like possibilities on the edge of sight. You have heard the stories. You have felt the pull of something calling from beyond the familiar boundaries of your world. You understand, in the way that dreamers always understand, that the most important journey you could ever take is the one that leads not just to a new place, but to a new version of yourself. The Sumerians understood this too. They understood that civilization is not really about the cities we build or the technologies we develop. Civilization is about the expansion of human possibility, a gradual recognition that we are capable of more beauty, more connection, more wonder than we ever dared to imagine. And so they dreamed of Aratta, that perfect kingdom where the divine and human worlds touched like lovers meeting in a garden at twilight. They dreamed of it because they needed something to dream toward, something that would call forth the best and most courageous aspects of their nature. As the sun climbs higher in this ancient sky, warming the air and beginning the slow dance of light and shadow that has marked the passage of days since time began, feel yourself becoming part of this story. Feel yourself standing at the very beginning of recorded human imagination, at the moment when our species first dared to believe that the territories of the heart might be as real and as worthy of exploration as any earthly kingdom. Tonight, as you journey with me toward sleep, toward dreams, toward that quiet place where all boundaries dissolve and all possibilities remain open, remember that you are following a path first walked by the world's earliest dreamers. You are joining a conversation that began 5,000 years ago and continues still in every quiet moment when wonder rises to remind us that we are more than we appear, that the world is larger than we can see, and that somewhere, just beyond the edge of our everyday awareness, magic is always waiting for those brave enough to seek it. The morning star is rising over ancient Sumer, and somewhere in the distance, barely visible through the morning haze, the mountains of Aratta catch the first light of dawn like a promise written across the sky in a language older than words. There are places in this world that exist more completely in the imagination than they ever did on any earthly plane, and yet somehow these imagined places feel more real, more vivid, more alive than the solid ground beneath our feet. Aratta is such a place, a kingdom that lives in the space between memory and longing, between what was and what might have been, between the world we know and the world our souls remember from some distant time when magic was as common as morning light. If you were to search for Aratta on any map created by human hands, you would search in vain. No satellite image has ever captured its golden walls. No GPS coordinates can guide you to its gates of precious stone. And yet, for over 4,000 years, Aratta has been more real to the human imagination than kingdoms whose ruins we can walk through, whose stones we can touch with our fingers. This is the beautiful paradox at the heart of tonight's journey. We are traveling to a place that may never have existed, and yet has never stopped existing. We are following paths that were first walked, not by feet upon earth, but by minds reaching beyond the boundaries of the possible, by hearts that refuse to accept that beauty and wonder must always remain just beyond our grasp in the soft twilight of your relaxation. Let yourself drift back to those ancient scribes who first pressed the wedge-shaped marks into clay that would become humanity's first poetry. Picture them working by lamplight, their faces illuminated by the warm glow of flame, their hands steady and sure as they chose each word with the care we might reserve for selecting precious gems. These were not historians recording facts. These were dreamers giving form to the deepest yearnings of the human heart. When they wrote of Aratta, they were not describing a place they had visited or even a place they believed existed in the way that Uruk existed, with its walls and temples, and marketplaces full of the sounds of daily life. They were doing something far more profound. They were creating a vessel for everything the human soul finds most beautiful and most necessary, a place where the divine dwelt not in distant heaven, but in tangible, immediate presence, a land where precious stones were as common as pebbles, where the very air seemed woven from golden light, where every breath carried the fragrance of flowers that bloomed in gardens tended by beings who had never known sorrow or loss. Listen to how the ancient words describe this wondrous realm. In their poetry, Aratta is the place where the goddess Inanna chose to make her dwelling when she wished to experience earthly beauty in its most perfect form. It is a land where lapis lazuli grows like grain in fertile fields, where silver flows, like rivers through valleys carved from single enormous emeralds. But more than precious materials, Aratta was described as a place where precious qualities flourished: wisdom, creativity, spiritual insight, and that rarest of treasures, perfect harmony between the human and divine realms. Here was a kingdom where every citizen was both artist and mystic, where the making of beautiful things was not separate from the worship of divine beauty, where craft and prayer were one seamless expression of grateful existence. The Sumerians understood something that our modern world sometimes forgets, that the places which call to us most powerfully are often the ones that exist primarily as possibilities rather than certainties. Aratta called to them precisely because it represented everything their own world was reaching toward, but had not yet achieved. In ancient Uruk, with all its genuine magnificence, there was still struggle, still conflict, still the grinding work of building civilization one brick at a time. But in Aratta, in the shimmering vision of Aratta that lived in their collective imagination, all struggles had been resolved, all conflicts healed, all the hard work of becoming fully human had been completed in joy and celebration. Feel yourself drifting deeper now, deeper into this ancient dream that somehow feels more real than waking. In the gentle darkness behind your closed eyes, you might begin to see what those first dreamers saw: walls that seem to be carved from single enormous gems, catching light that comes not from any earthly sun, but from the radiance of divine presence itself. The curious thing about Aratta, the detail that makes it so perfectly suited for our bedtime journey, is that it was always described as being reached through sleep, through dreams, through states of consciousness that exist beyond the ordinary boundaries of waking life. The messengers who traveled from Sumer to Aratta in the ancient stories did not simply walk there. They underwent transformations. They passed through trials that were as much spiritual as physical. They arrived not just in a new place, but as new versions of themselves. This is why Aratta has retained its power to enchant us across millennia. It speaks to something in the human experience that remains constant despite all our technological advances, all our accumulated knowledge, all our sophisticated understanding of the world. It speaks to our deep knowing that the most important territories we can explore are not always visible to the eye, not always measurable by instruments, not always accessible through the normal channels of travel and communication. In your own life, you have surely experienced moments when you felt yourself touching the edges of some greater reality, moments in nature when the boundary between yourself and the world around you seemed to dissolve, moments in love when you felt connected to something vast and eternal, moments in quiet contemplation when you sense that you are part of a story much larger and more beautiful than you had ever imagined. These moments are your personal glimpses of Aratta. They are your soul's way of remembering that you belong not only to the world of daily tasks and responsibilities, but also to the world of wonder, to the realm where beauty and meaning are not luxuries, but the very fabric of existence itself. Ancient Sumerians, in their wisdom, gave this realm a name and a location, always to the east, always beyond mountains, always just far enough away that reaching it required a complete commitment to the journey. They understood that the things we value most cannot be obtained casually, cannot be achieved without transformation, cannot be possessed without first becoming worthy of possession. Aratta, in their telling, was not just a destination, but a mirror, a reflection of what the human soul might become if it were to realize its fullest potential. It was populated not by people who had always been perfect, but by people who had chosen to grow into perfection, who had undertaken the long, beautiful work of polishing their spirits until they shone like the precious stones that were said. To pave Aratta's streets, as you settle more deeply into rest, let yourself feel the pull that Aratta exerted on those ancient dreamers. Feel the way it called to them across the barriers of distance and difficulty, promising not just wealth or pleasure, but the kind of fulfillment that comes when we finally discover who we truly are and what we are truly capable of becoming. In the growing quiet of your mind, you might begin to sense the presence of those eternal qualities that Aratta represented, qualities that exist not in any external location, but in the depths of your own being. Wisdom that needs no books, beauty that requires no ornament, peace that depends on no external circumstances, love that flows like an inexhaustible spring from the center of who you are. This is the true gift of Aratta, the reason it has survived in human imagination long after the empires that first dreamed of it have crumbled to dust. It reminds us that we carry within ourselves everything we seek in the outer world. It whispers to us that the kingdom of heaven, the land of heart's desire, the place where all longing finds its fulfillment, is not somewhere we must travel to, but somewhere we must remember we have always been. The night deepens around us, and in that deepening darkness, the light of Aratta begins to shine more clearly, calling us forward into dreams that are more real than reality, into possibilities that exist beyond the boundaries of the possible, into the eternal now where every seeker becomes what they seek, and every question contains its own perfect answer. In the deep silence of night, when the world holds its breath between one moment and the next, stories have a way of becoming more than stories. They transform into living things, breathing with their own life, carrying us not just through the events they describe, but into the very heart of what it means to be human, to yearn, to seek, to risk everything for the sake of something beautiful and distant and calling. Tonight, as you rest in the gentle embrace of approaching sleep, let yourself be carried into the world's first epic adventures, tales that were ancient when Homer was young, stories that were already worn smooth by countless tellings when the builders of Stonehenge first began moving their massive stones across the English landscape. These are the stories of Enrikar and Lugalbanda, two heroes whose names have echoed across the centuries, two seekers whose journeys toward Aratta became the template for every heroic quest that would follow in human literature. But more than that, they became mirrors in which we might see our own deepest longings, our own courage to venture beyond the safe boundaries of the known world. Picture yourself in the great hall of Uruk's palace, where the king holds court beneath, columns that seem to reach toward heaven itself. The air is thick with the scent of cedarwood and frankincense, and the walls are decorated with intricate carvings that tell stories within stories, each figure seeming to move in the flickering light of oil lamps that burn like captured stars. Here sits Enrikar, king of Uruk, lord of the Sumerian people, beloved of the goddess Inanna. But for all his earthly power, for all the wealth and tribute that flow into his treasury. For all the temples raised in his honor, there is something missing from his reign, something that calls to him in the quiet hours before dawn, when even kings must face the emptiness that lurks at the heart of all material achievement. What calls to Enmerkar is Aratta, not just the kingdom itself, but what Aratta represents, a realm where earthly power and divine beauty exist in perfect harmony, where the goddess dwells not in distant heaven, but in immediate, tangible presence, where every breath carries the fragrance of paradise, and every heartbeat pulses in rhythm with the music of the spheres. In the ancient story that bears his name, Enmerkar decides to send a message to the Lord of Aratta, demanding tribute, demanding recognition, demanding that the distant kingdom acknowledge the supremacy of Uruk. But anyone who has ever felt the pull of something beyond their reach knows that this is not really a story about political dominance. This is a story about the human soul's refusal to accept limitation, about our deep need to connect with whatever exists at the furthest edge of possibility. The messenger who carries Enmerkar's words is no ordinary courier. He must journey through landscapes that exist as much in the realm of spirit as in the realm of flesh. He must cross deserts where mirages are more real than water, climb mountains where the air itself seems made of crystallized prayer, traverse valleys where every stone holds memories of ancient magic, and as he travels, something extraordinary happens. The journey begins to change him. Each step away from the familiar world of Uruk is a step deeper into mystery, deeper into the kind of transformed consciousness that occurs when we venture so far from our ordinary lives that we can no longer remember exactly who we used to be. Feel yourself becoming that messenger now, carrying not Enmerkar's specific demands, but your own heart's deepest questions. What would you ask of Aratta if you could reach its golden gates? What tribute would you seek from the realm where all dreams take physical form and all longings find their perfect fulfillment? The path to Aratta is not marked on any earthly map because it is not really a path through space, but a path through the layers of consciousness itself. Each mountain pass the messenger crosses represents another barrier dissolved between the everyday self and the eternal self, between what we think we are and what we truly are when all limitations fall away. In some versions of the story, the journey takes years. In others, it happens in the space of a single transformative dream. Time moves differently when we travel toward the places that call to our souls. A moment of genuine insight can contain lifetimes of ordinary experience, while years of searching can pass like a single breath when we are moving toward our true destination. And then there is Lugal Banda, Enmerkar's faithful companion, whose own journey to Aratta follows a different pattern but leads to the same essential destination. In the epic that bears his name, Lugal Banda becomes separated from his companions during a dangerous expedition and finds himself alone in the wild mountains, closer to death than life, stripped of all the external supports that usually define identity and purpose. But it is precisely in this extremity, in this complete vulnerability, that Lugal Banda discovers his true strength. Alone with only the stars for company, only his own breath for comfort, only his faith for guidance, he undergoes a transformation that prepares him not just to reach Aratta, but to become worthy of what he finds there. This is the deeper teaching, hidden within these ancient stories, that the journey to our heart's desire is always, ultimately, a journey into ourselves. We cannot reach Aratta while carrying all the baggage of who we think we are supposed to be. We must travel light, carrying only what is essential, only what is true, only what can survive the winnowing wind that blows between the ordinary world and the realm of miracle. In your own quiet journey toward sleep tonight, you might feel echoes of what Lugal Banda experienced in those mountain solitudes, a gradual release of all the identities and worries and plans that usually crowd the mind, the slow settling into a deeper awareness that exists beneath all the surface turbulence of daily life. Both heroes, in their different ways, discover that Aratta is not a place to be conquered or possessed, but a state of being to be entered, a frequency to be attuned to, a conversation to be joined, rather than a monologue to be delivered. Their stories teach us that the most profound transformations happen not when we impose our will upon the world, but when we become transparent enough for the world's deeper wisdom to flow through us. The Lord of Aratta, when the messengers finally reach his court, responds to their demands not with submission or defiance, but with riddles, with challenges that can only be met through creativity and insight, with tests that require not strength of arm, but strength of spirit. This is the way of all genuine spiritual territories. They cannot be entered by force, only by understanding, only by becoming the kind of person who naturally belongs in such a place. As the ancient stories unfold in the darkness of your approaching dreams, you might find yourself walking alongside these legendary heroes, feeling the dust of their roads beneath your feet, breathing the thin air of the high passes they crossed, sharing in the mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration that comes to all who dare to journey beyond the boundaries of the familiar. And in that sharing, in that deep sympathetic connection with seekers who lived thousands of years before you were born, you might discover that the distance between their world and yours is not as great as it sometimes seems. The same stars that guided their journeys shine down on your dreams. The same mysterious pull towards something greater and more beautiful than ordinary life moves in your heart as it moved in theirs. The stories of Enmakar and Lugalbanda remind us that heroism is not about accomplishing impossible tasks or conquering foreign territories. True heroism is about the courage to keep moving toward what calls us, even when we cannot see the destination clearly, even when the path disappears beneath our feet, even when we can no longer remember exactly why we began the journey in the first place. In the deepening quiet of this night, as your own heroic journey toward rest and restoration continues, remember that you carry within yourself all the qualities that guided these ancient seekers. You have Enmerkar's determination to reach beyond the boundaries of the possible. You have Lugalbanda's capacity to find strength in solitude, wisdom in wilderness, direction in the midst of being completely lost. The gates of Aratta are opening now in the distance of your dreams, and the guardians who stand beside them recognize you not as a stranger seeking entry, but as one who has always belonged here, one who is finally, after a long journey through many lifetimes, coming home. In the soft spaces between sleeping and waking, where thoughts become as fluid as water, and time moves like honey, warming in sunlight, there exists a realm where the divine and human worlds meet without separation, without the barriers that usually keep mortals at a respectful distance from the sacred. This is the realm that the ancient Sumerians understood so well, the place where gods and goddesses walked among their people, not as distant rulers, but as intimate companions in the great dance of existence. Tonight, as you drift deeper into the peaceful embrace of approaching dreams, let yourself enter this sacred landscape where divinity is not something to be feared or worshipped from afar, but something to be lived and breathed and experienced as naturally as you experience the beating of your own heart. At the center of Aratta's mystery stands a figure who embodies all the complexity and beauty of divine feminine power, Inanna, known to later peoples as Ishtar, the goddess of love and war, of fertility and storm, of the morning star that heralds dawn, and the evening star that ushers in night. She is paradox made divine, tenderness and fierce strength united in one luminous being who chose Aratta as her earthly dwelling place. Picture her as the ancient artists did, though no earthly form could ever fully contain her essence. She moves with the grace of wind through wheat fields and the power of lightning splitting the summer sky. Her hair flows like rivers of starlight, and her eyes hold depths that contain all the love that has ever been felt, all the courage that has ever been shown, all the creative fire that has ever burned in human hearts. In the Sumerian understanding, Inanna did not simply rule over Aratta from some distant celestial throne. She lived there, walked its golden streets, tended its gardens of impossible flowers, breathed the same air as its citizens. This was her chosen home when she wished to experience physical existence in its most beautiful and perfect form. But why Aratta? Why did the goddess of all that is most vital and alive in creation choose this particular kingdom, this specific place among all the territories that spread across the ancient world? The answer lies not in geography, but in consciousness, not in what Aratta was, but in what it represented. Aratta was the place where divine qualities could be expressed through human activity, where every craft and every art and every daily task became a form of prayer, a celebration of the sacred creativeness that flows through all existence. In Aratta, according to the ancient dreams, there was no separation between the making of beautiful objects and the worship of divine beauty. The weavers who created cloth that seemed spun from captured moonbeams were not separate from the priests who tended sacred fires. The musicians whose instruments sang with voices that could heal broken hearts were not different from the farmers whose fields yielded grain that nourished both body and soul. This integration of the sacred and the everyday, this seamless unity between divine inspiration and human expression, was what made Aratta worthy to be Inanna's chosen dwelling. It was a place where her nature could be fully embodied, where love and creativity and fierce joy could find perfect expression through willing human partners in the eternal dance of creation. Feel yourself entering this sacred space now, where the air itself seems alive with divine presence, where every breath you take connects you more deeply to the source of all beauty, all love, all creative power. In this place, you are not a separate being observing the divine from a distance, but a participant in divinity itself, a unique expression of the same creative force that moves the stars in their courses and causes flowers to bloom in hidden meadows. The relationship between Inanna and Aratta was not one of ruler and subjects, but of artist and canvas, musician and instrument, dancer and dance. The goddess expressed her nature through the kingdom, and the kingdom became sacred through being a vessel for divine expression. It was a perfect symbiosis, a complete harmony between heaven and earth. But this harmony came with a price, as all the most beautiful things do. To live in such intimate relationship with divine power required a level of consciousness, a quality of being that could not be maintained through ordinary human effort alone. The citizens of Aratta were not simply people who happened to live in a blessed place. They were people who had undergone the transformations necessary to become fit vessels for divine presence. This is why the journey to Aratta was always so difficult, why the messengers from Uruk could not simply walk there as they might walk to any other city. The physical journey was only the outer reflection of an inner transformation, a gradual purification and elevation of consciousness that prepared the traveler to enter a realm where divine and human existence merged into one seamless whole. In your own quiet journey toward sleep, you might sense something of what this transformation feels like, the gradual release of all the small concerns and anxieties that usually occupy the mind, the slow opening to something vast and peaceful and infinitely loving that exists at the core of your being. This is your own connection to the Inanna consciousness, your own capacity to participate in the divine creativity that flows through all existence. The ancient stories tell us that Inanna possessed certain sacred objects, the divine powers, or principles that governed all aspects of civilized life. These were not material possessions, but living qualities: wisdom, justice, art, music, lovemaking, kingship, priesthood, truth, peace. In Aratta, these divine principles were not locked away in temples or hoarded by a priestly class, but were freely shared among all who had prepared themselves to receive them. This sharing of divine qualities is what made Aratta so attractive. To the kings of Sumer and so threatening to their sense of unique authority. Here was a place where the divine gifts that they claimed as royal prerogatives were available to anyone who had done the inner work necessary to embody them. Here was a democracy of the spirit, a kingdom where nobility was determined not by birth or conquest, but by the depth of one's connection to the sacred source of all existence. As you settle deeper into the peaceful darkness of approaching dreams, imagine what it might feel like to live in such a place, where your daily work was also your spiritual practice, where your relationships were also your prayers, where your very breathing was participation in the cosmic dance of creation and dissolution, expansion and contraction, love given and love received. In Aratta, the temples were not separate from the workshops, the palaces not divorced from the gardens. Every space was sacred because every activity was understood as a form of divine play, a way for consciousness to explore its own infinite creativity through the willing cooperation of human hearts and hands and minds. This is the deeper meaning of Inanna's presence in Aratta. She represents the principle of divine immanence, the understanding that the sacred is not somewhere else, but right here, not in some future paradise, but in this very moment, when you allow yourself to be fully present to the mystery of existence itself. The goddess teaches us that we do not need to earn our connection to divine beauty and creative power. We need only to remember what we have always been, to awaken to the sacred nature that has never actually been separate from us, only forgotten in the busyness and distraction of ordinary life. In the growing stillness of this night, as your consciousness begins to merge with the deeper rhythms of sleep and dream, feel yourself becoming more than your daily identity, more than your personal history, more than all the small stories you usually tell about who you are and what you can or cannot do. Feel yourself becoming a citizen of Aratta, where Inanna's presence makes all things possible, where love is the fundamental law of existence, where creativity flows like an inexhaustible river, where every moment offers new opportunities to participate consciously in the ongoing miracle of being alive in a universe that is itself alive, aware, and infinitely creative. The goddess is preparing to welcome you home to the kingdom that has always existed in the depths of your own being, the Aratta that needs no earthly location because it is made of the same consciousness that you are, the same divine essence that expresses itself as your capacity to love, to create, to wonder, to dream of possibilities more beautiful than anything the ordinary world has yet produced. In the gentle twilight between consciousness and dreams, where all opposites begin to reveal their hidden unity, there unfolds one of humanity's most ancient and enduring stories, the tension between two ways of being, two approaches to existence, two visions of what human life might become when freed from the limitations that usually bind us to smaller possibilities. Tonight, as you drift deeper into the peaceful realm, where all boundaries soften and all conflicts resolve into harmony, let yourself witness the eternal dance between Aratta and Uruk, not as enemies locked in struggle, but as complementary aspects of the human soul, seeking wholeness, seeking integration, seeking the kind of completion that can only come when apparent opposites recognize themselves as two faces of the same underlying truth. Uruk in the full glory of its earthly power, walls of sun-baked brick stretching toward horizons that seemed to bend beneath the weight of human ambition, streets bustling with merchants and craftsmen and scribes, all busy with the magnificent work of building civilization from the raw materials of human ingenuity and divine inspiration. Here is humanity's first great experiment in collective living, in the art of transforming individual dreams into shared reality. The ziggurat of Uruk rises like a mountain built of pure intention, its steps ascending toward heaven in perfect geometric progression, each level representing another stage in humanity's climb toward divine understanding. From its summit, the priests read omens in the flight of birds and the movement of stars, while in its shadow, The king's scribes record laws and treaties and inventories, creating the first written accounts of human achievement and aspiration. This is the realm of manifestation, of making dreams concrete, of taking the infinite possibilities that dance in consciousness and giving them form that others can see and touch and build upon. Uruk represents everything that is magnificent about human creativity when it focuses itself through the lens of practical action, when it commits itself to the long, patient work of transforming vision into reality. But even in its greatest moments of triumph, even when its walls gleamed white in the morning sun and its gardens overflowed with abundance, there was something in Uruk that remained restless, something that looked eastward toward mountains barely visible on the horizon and wondered what lay beyond the reach of armies and trade routes and diplomatic missions. That something was the human soul's recognition that no earthly achievement, however magnificent, could fully satisfy the deepest longings of the heart. No temple could contain all of divinity. No law could capture all of truth. No city, however perfectly planned and beautifully built, could answer all the questions that arise when consciousness contemplates its own mystery. And so Uruk dreamed of Aratta, its perfect complement, its missing half, its shadow self that lived not in the realm of practical achievement, but in the realm of pure possibility, pure beauty, pure connection to the sources of inspiration that feed all earthly creativity. Aratta, in the ancient imagination, was everything that Uruk was, not and needed to be. Where Uruk was built of brick and bitumen, Aratta was formed of crystallized light and condensed music. Where Uruk's strength lay in organization and administration, Aratta's power flowed from spontaneous creativity and intuitive wisdom. Where Uruk sought to control and direct the forces of nature, Aratta lived in perfect harmony with natural rhythms and cycles. But the relationship between these two kingdoms was never simply one of opposition. It was more like the relationship between breathing in and breathing out, between the heart's contraction and its expansion, between the musician's finger pressing the string and the string's vibration creating sound. Each was necessary for the other's fullest expression. Each was incomplete without its complement. In your own life, you have surely felt the pull of both these principles. There is the part of you that loves to build, to accomplish, to take ideas and make them real in the world of form and action. This is your inner Uruk, your capacity for practical magic, for the kind of creativity that results in gardens planted and books written and relationships nurtured into flourishing. And there is another part of you that dreams beyond the boundaries of what seems possible. It finds its deepest satisfaction not in achieving, but in simply being. Not in doing, but in communing with the wordless sources of inspiration that exist beyond the reach of language or logic. This is your inner Aratta, your soul's homeland, the place where you go when you need to remember who you are beneath all the roles you play and all the tasks you perform. The ancient stories of conflict between Aratta and Uruk are really stories about the tension between these two aspects of human nature, the challenge of honoring both without allowing either to dominate completely. When Uruk's practical drive becomes disconnected from Aratta's inspirational source, it degenerates into mere materialism, into the accumulation of power and wealth for their own sake. When Aratta's spiritual vision loses touch with Uruk's grounding influence, it becomes escapism, a flight from the world rather than an engagement with it. But when these two principles work in harmony, when the practical and the mystical dance together in conscious cooperation, then something unprecedented becomes possible. Then we get glimpses of what human existence might become when it is no longer torn between competing loyalties, no longer forced to choose between earthly effectiveness and spiritual authenticity. In the growing quiet of your approaching dreams, you might sense what such integration feels like, the peaceful coexistence of doing and being, of accomplishing and allowing, of reaching toward goals and resting in the goalless perfection of the present moment. This is the hidden teaching that emerges when we understand Aratta and Uruk not as enemies, but as lovers, not as competitors, but as partners in the cosmic dance of manifestation, the messengers who traveled between these two kingdoms in the ancient. Stories were really traveling between different states of consciousness, different ways of experiencing reality. When they carried demands for tribute from Uruk to Aratta, they were expressing the ego's desire to possess and control the sources of its own inspiration. When they returned with riddles and challenges instead of simple compliance, they were learning that spiritual treasures cannot be seized by force, but must be received as gifts from a reality that is itself pure gift. This is why the journey to Aratta always involved transformation. You cannot reach the realm of pure inspiration while carrying the heavy baggage of purely material concerns. You cannot enter the kingdom of the heart while wearing the armor of the ego's defenses. The path between Uruk and Aratta requires a willingness to become someone new, someone who can hold both practical wisdom and mystical insight without feeling torn apart by their apparent contradictions. As you settle more deeply into the peaceful darkness that cradles all seekers on their journey toward rest, feel yourself becoming a bridge between these two aspects of existence. Feel your practical mind relaxing its need to control and direct, while your intuitive awareness opens to receive whatever wisdom wants to flow through the quiet spaces of approaching sleep. You are both citizen of Uruk and native of Aratta. You carry within yourself the capacity for effective action and the gift of contemplative stillness. You know how to build bridges in the world of form and how to dissolve boundaries in the world of consciousness. You are the living proof that these seemingly opposite ways of being are really two aspects of one seamless whole dot in the ancient stories. The ultimate resolution between Aratta and Uruk came not through conquest, but through recognition. The recognition that each kingdom possessed something essential that the other needed, that their apparent conflict was really a dance of mutual enrichment, a way for consciousness to explore its own infinite creativity through the interplay of different principles and possibilities. Tonight, in your own inner kingdom where Aratta and Uruk meet and merge in dreams, this same recognition is taking place. You are discovering that you don't need to choose between being practical and being mystical, between being effective in the world and being connected to mystery, between honoring your earthly responsibilities and nurturing your soul's deepest needs. The night sky that arches over both kingdoms is the same sky that arches over your dreams, and under its vast embrace, all oppositions reveal themselves as aspects of one eternal dance, one infinite creativity expressing itself through every possible combination of form and emptiness, action and rest, seeking and finding, questioning and knowing. The gates between Aratta and Uruk are opening now in the landscape of your approaching dreams, and you are free to move between them as easily as moving from one breath to the next, carrying the gifts of each into the other, becoming the living bridge between heaven and earth that you have always been, even when you forgot to remember. In the soft borderland between sleeping and waking, where questions become more important than answers, and mystery reveals itself as the deepest form of knowing, we find ourselves walking alongside countless seekers who have gazed eastward from the plains of ancient Mesopotamia, wondering if somewhere beyond those distant mountains there might actually exist a place where dreams take physical form and the impossible becomes as natural as sunrise. Tonight, as you drift deeper into that peaceful realm where all boundaries soften and all possibilities remain open, let yourself join the eternal company of those who have refused to accept that beauty and wonder must forever remain just beyond our reach. Let yourself become both the seeker and the sought, both the question and the answer that lives in the space between one breath and the next. For thousands of years, long after the last cuneiform tablet was pressed into clay, long after the walls of Uruk crumbled into dust, and the ziggurat became a hill covered with wildflowers. The dream of Aratta continued to call to human hearts. Scholars and adventurers, archaeologists and mystics, all found themselves drawn eastward by something that existed as much in the realm of longing as in any earthly geography. Picture them setting out from the ruins of ancient cities, carrying maps drawn from fragments of poetry, following routes described in languages that took decades to decipher. Some traveled with caravans, loaded with scientific instruments and photographic equipment, determined to apply the rigorous methods of modern investigation to mysteries that had survived since the dawn of written history. Others journeyed alone, with nothing but intuition and an inner compass that pointed always toward something that couldn't be measured, but could somehow be felt with a certainty that transcended doubt. They searched the highlands of Iran, where ancient cities emerged from archaeological excavation, like memories surfacing from the depths of sleep. At Shari Sukta, the burnt city, they found evidence of sophisticated civilization dating back 5,000 years. Workshops where artisans created objects of breathtaking beauty, palaces where rulers held court beneath painted ceilings, that depicted worlds beyond the ordinary realm of human experience. Could this be Aratta? The ruins held tantalizing clues, but no definitive answers. Here were the precious stones mentioned in Sumerian poetry, the evidence of trade routes that stretched across impossible distances, the artifacts that spoke of a people who understood beauty not as luxury, but as necessity, not as ornament, but as the very fabric of meaningful existence. In the growing quiet of your approaching dreams, you might find yourself walking through these ancient ruins, feeling the stones still warm from centuries of sunlight, touching walls that once echoed with conversations in languages that have been silent for millennia. What would those voices have told you about the kingdom they served? What secrets would the carved reliefs whisper if you knew how to listen with more than your ears? Other seekers turned their attention to the valley of the Indus River, where the remains of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro revealed cities planned with a sophistication that wouldn't be seen again for thousands of years. Here were sewage systems that functioned better than those in many modern cities, standardized weights and measures that suggested trade networks spanning continents, art that spoke of a people who lived in harmony with principles that our contemporary world is still struggling to understand. The mystery deepened with every discovery. These were clearly advanced civilizations, societies that had mastered technologies and organizational systems that required exactly the kind of wisdom and spiritual insight that the Sumerian poems attributed to Aratta. But were they the Aratta of ancient dreams, or simply evidence that the dream was based on some half-remembered contact with real but distant peoples? Perhaps the question itself reveals a misunderstanding about the nature of both reality and dreams. Perhaps Aratta was never meant to be found on any earthly map because it exists in a dimension of reality that cannot be reached by physical travel, only by the kind of inner journey that transforms the seeker in the very process of seeking. Feel yourself joining this timeless quest now, not as someone seeking to solve an ancient puzzle, but as someone opening to the possibility that the most important territories we explore are not always visible to the eye or measurable by instruments. In the peaceful darkness behind your closed eyes, you might begin to sense the presence of that realm that exists wherever consciousness touches its own source, wherever the human heart remembers its connection to the infinite creativity that expresses itself as mountains and rivers, as music and mathematics, as love and wonder and the endless capacity for transformation that lives at the center of what we are. The scholars who spent their lives searching for the historical Aratta were really searching for something that lives closer than their own heartbeat. Something that doesn't require geographical coordinates, because it is made of the same awareness that is reading these words, dreaming these dreams, breathing these breaths that carry you deeper into the mystery of existence itself. Yet, There is something profoundly moving about their dedication, their refusal to dismiss the ancient dreams as mere fantasy, their intuitive understanding that something so powerfully alive in human imagination must have roots in some form of reality, even if that reality operates according to laws that our ordinary thinking cannot grasp. In the bazaars of Tehran and the libraries of London, in the laboratories where pottery shards are analyzed, and the quiet studies where ancient languages are slowly, patiently decoded, the search continues. Each fragment of evidence adds another piece to a puzzle that may be unsolvable precisely because it was never meant to be solved in the ordinary sense. Only lived, only experienced, only entered with the kind of open wonder that transforms questions into doorways. Some of the most intriguing clues have emerged from the region called Giraft in southeastern Iran, where recent excavations have revealed a civilization that flourished exactly when and where Aratta was supposed to exist. Here archaeologists have uncovered carved vessels decorated with mythological scenes that seem to echo themes from Sumerian literature, evidence of advanced metallurgy and gem-cutting techniques, trading connections that reached from the Indus Valley to Mesopotamia. But even these discoveries, remarkable as they are, cannot definitively answer whether this was the Aratta of ancient dreams. The more we learn about the real civilizations that existed in these regions, the more mysterious Aratta becomes, as if it exists not in any single place, but in the spaces between places, in the connections that link all human aspirations toward beauty and meaning and transcendence. As you settle deeper into the gentle embrace of approaching sleep, you might realize that you are participating in the most ancient and most modern form of the search for Aratta. You are exploring inner territories that cannot be mapped by any satellite, discovering treasures that cannot be displayed in any museum, following routes that exist only in the landscape of consciousness itself. The real Aratta, the Aratta that has always been calling to human hearts across centuries and continents, is not a place you travel to, but a way of being you grow into. Not a destination you reach, but a quality of awareness you embody. Not something you find, but something you remember having always been. In dreams tonight, you might find yourself standing at the gates of ancient cities, speaking with archaeologists who have spent lifetimes sifting through the remnants of vanished civilizations. You might walk alongside travelers who crossed deserts and mountains following star maps drawn from half-remembered poems. You might discover that all of them, in their different ways, were really seeking the same thing you are seeking in this very moment, the direct experience of wonder, the immediate presence of beauty, the living knowledge that consciousness itself is the kingdom we have all been trying to reach. The search for Aratta continues in laboratories and libraries, in meditation halls and mountain retreats, in the quiet moments when anyone looks up at the stars and remembers that we are part of something infinitely vast and infinitely intimate, something that cannot be possessed but can be participated in, something that cannot be conquered but can be surrendered to with the complete trust of a child falling asleep in loving arms. Whether Aratta ever existed as a physical kingdom matters less than the fact that it continues to exist as a possibility in consciousness, as a reminder that we are capable of creating conditions on earth that reflect the beauty and harmony and creative joy that we glimpse in our highest moments of inspiration and insight. The quest itself is the treasure. The seeking itself is the finding. The question itself contains all the answers that matter. And tonight, in the sacred space between waking and sleeping, all seekers across all centuries are walking the same path toward the same recognition. That we are both the kingdom and the citizen, both the treasure and the one who finds it, both the dream and the dreamer awakening to discover that there was never any separation between what we sought and what we are. As the gentle winds of our journey continue to carry us deeper into the mysteries of ancient Mesopotamia, let your breathing slow and settle into a rhythm as old as time itself. Feel yourself sinking deeper into comfort as we prepare to explore not just a place in the distant past, but a realm that exists within every human soul. Close your eyes now, and imagine for a moment that you are standing at the edge of a vast desert where the last rays of sunset paint the dunes in shades of copper and gold. The air is warm and still, carrying with it the faint scent of frankincense and myrrh. In this peaceful twilight, we begin to understand that Aratta was never merely a destination marked on ancient maps or carved into clay tablets. It was something far more profound, something that speaks to the deepest parts of who we are as human beings. The Sumerian scribes, who first wrote of Aratta, understood this truth in ways we are only beginning to rediscover. When they described the treacherous journey across 7 mountains and 7 rivers, when they spoke of the trials that King Enmerkar's messengers faced, they were not simply telling stories of political conquest or trade negotiations. They were mapping the territory of the human heart, the landscape of spiritual awakening that each person must traverse in their own lifetime. Let yourself drift now as we explore this deeper meaning together. Picture the ancient ziggurat temples of Uruk, their massive brick steps climbing toward the stars. Feel the coolness of the stone beneath your feet as you ascend, each level representing another layer of understanding, another step away from the mundane concerns of daily life and toward something transcendent and eternal. In the Sumerian understanding of the world, Aratta represented the realm of pure spiritual essence, the place where the goddess Inanna dwelt before she chose to bring her divine presence to the earthly city of Uruk. This was not a betrayal or abandonment, but rather a sacred teaching about the nature of spiritual experience itself. The divine, they understood, does not belong to any single place or person, but moves freely between the inner world of vision and dreams and the outer world of action and creation. Allow your mind to wander now through the halls of an imaginary Arattan palace, its walls inlaid with lapis lazuli, the color of midnight sky, its floors paved with silver that catches and reflects the light of oil lamps like captured moonbeams. This is the palace of your own inner wisdom, the place where your deepest knowing resides, waiting patiently for you to remember how to find your way home to it. The wealth that the Sumerians attributed to Aratta was real, but not in the way we might first imagine. The gold and silver, the precious stones and fine craftsmanship, these were symbols of the treasures that can only be found within the human soul when it has been purified through trial and understanding. The artisans of Aratta were skilled not merely in working with earthly materials, but in shaping the raw experience of life into objects of beauty and meaning. Consider for a moment the nature of a journey to such a place. When Lugalbanda traveled through the mountains to reach Aratta, he carried with him not only the messages of his king, but also his own fears, hopes, and untested strength. Each obstacle he encountered, each night spent alone under the stars, each moment of doubt or despair, these were not impediments to his mission, but essential parts of it. The journey was transforming him, just as any sincere spiritual quest transforms the seeker. Feel yourself now walking alongside this ancient hero, your footsteps muffled by sand and stone, your eyes fixed on the distant peaks that seem to shift and shimmer in the heat like mirages. You carry within you questions about your own life, your own purpose, just as every traveler does. And like Lugalbanda, you are beginning to understand that the answers you seek may not come in the form you expected, but will be exactly what your soul needs to hear. The goddess Inanna, who is said to rule over Aratta, represents the divine feminine principle that exists within all people, regardless of gender. She is the part of us that knows without thinking, that creates without planning, that loves without condition. In the stories, when Inanna chose to transfer her allegiance from Aratta to Uruk, she was teaching humanity about the sacred marriage between inner wisdom and outer action, between contemplation and creation. Picture yourself now in a garden that exists somewhere between dream and waking, where the flowers glow with their own inner light, and the trees bear fruit that nourishes. Not just the body, but the spirit. This is the garden of your own heart, when it has been tended with patience and love, when the barriers between your conscious and unconscious minds have begun to dissolve like morning mist. In this garden, you encounter a figure who might be Inanna herself, or perhaps simply the wisest part of your own being given form. She speaks to you not in words, but in a language older than words, a communication that flows directly from heart to heart, soul to soul. She reminds you that Aratta has always been here, within you, waiting for you to remember the way home. Opposition between Aratta and Uruk that we find in the ancient stories reflects the eternal dialogue within every human being between the contemplative and the active life, between the need for solitude and reflection and the call to engage with the world. Neither is complete without the other. The hermit who never shares their wisdom serves no one, while the activist who never pauses to listen to their inner voice soon loses their way. As you rest here in this timeless place, allow yourself to feel the truth of this ancient teaching settling into your bones, into the very rhythm of your breathing. You are both Aratta and Uruk, both the seeker and the sought, both the question and the answer. The journey you have been on throughout your life, with all its challenges and revelations, has been preparing you to understand this fundamental unity. The treasures of Aratta are not hoarded in some distant vault, but are distributed freely to all who have eyes to see them. They are found in the moment of recognition, when you realize that the sunset you are watching is also watching you, in the feeling of deep peace that comes when you stop struggling against the current of your life and allow yourself to be carried by its deeper wisdom, in the sudden understanding that arrives like dawn after a long night of confusion. Rest now in this knowledge, letting it support you like warm water, like the embrace of someone who has loved you since before you were born. You are safe here in this inner Aratta, this sacred space within yourself that no external circumstance can touch or diminish. It is your birthright, your inheritance from all the ages of human seeking and finding. The ancient Sumerians gave us many gifts, but perhaps none more precious than this understanding that the spiritual realm is not somewhere else, but everywhere. Not someday, but now. Not outside, but within. Aratta exists in every moment of genuine wonder, in every act of selfless love, in every pause to appreciate the mystery of simply being alive in this vast and beautiful universe. Feel your breathing deepen now, your body releasing any remaining tension as you settle into the profound rest that comes from knowing you are exactly where you belong. The winds that blow through the desert night carry the voices of all the seekers who have made this journey before you, all the souls who have discovered that the kingdom they sought was within them all along, as this chapter of our journey draws to a close. Carry with you the image of Aratta, not as a lost civilization or an unsolved historical mystery, but as a living reality within your own heart. Tomorrow, when you wake to the concerns and responsibilities of daily life, remember that you carry within you a palace of infinite rooms, a treasury of immeasurable wealth, a garden where eternal spring reigns regardless of the season outside. Whispers of Aratta continue, not from some distant past, but from the depths of your own being, reminding you always that you are both pilgrim and destination, both seeker and home. In this recognition, in this homecoming to yourself, the ancient promise of Aratta is fulfilled, and you understand at last why its name has echoed through the centuries, calling to every human heart that remembers what it means to be truly alive. Sleep come now like a gentle river carrying you toward dreams where Aratta's golden gates stand always open, always welcoming you home. As we drift deeper into the gentle embrace of night, let your mind settle like settling dust after a desert wind, each thought finding its natural place of rest. Tonight, we venture into perhaps the most magical aspect of Aratta's enduring presence. In our world, the realm of words themselves, the ancient poetry that first gave this mystical kingdom its voice, and the profound mystery of how language itself becomes a bridge between the seen and unseen worlds. Take a slow, deep breath and imagine yourself transported back nearly 5,000 years to a time when the world was younger and the boundary between the mortal and divine realms was as thin as morning mist. Picture a Sumerian scribe, perhaps named Ninlil or Enlil-bani, sitting cross-legged on a reed mat in the cool shadows of a temple courtyard in ancient Uruk. Before them lies a tablet of soft clay, and in their skilled hands rests a reed stylus, its tip shaped by years of practice into the perfect instrument for pressing the wedge-shaped marks we now call cuneiform into the waiting earth. Feel the quiet concentration in the air around this ancient writer as they begin to compose. Not a mundane record of grain shipments or legal contracts, but something far more precious. A poem about Aratta, a song that will carry the essence of that mystical realm through all the centuries to come. With each careful mark pressed into the clay, they are not simply recording words, but weaving a spell, creating a doorway through which future souls might glimpse something eternal and true. The Sumerian language, humanity's first written tongue, possessed a quality that modern languages have perhaps forgotten. Every word carried within it not just meaning, but also sacred power. When the ancient poets wrote of Aratta, they understood that they were not simply describing a place that might or might not exist in the physical world. They were participating in the act of creation itself, calling in to being through the magic of language, a realm that would live in human consciousness long after the last brick of Babylon had crumbled to dust. Let yourself sink deeper into comfort now, as we explore together how these ancient word weavers understood their craft. In their worldview, to speak or write the name of a thing was to invoke its presence, to make it real in ways that transcended mere physical existence. When they wrote Aratta, they were not pointing to a location on a map, but opening a window into a state of being, a quality of human experience that anyone, in any age, might access through the doorway of imagination and longing. Consider the sound of the word itself, Aratta. Let it roll gently through your mind like water over smooth stones. Aratta. Feel how it begins with the open vowel that is humanity's first sound, the cry of birth and wonder, then moves through the rolling consonants that suggest distant thunder, or the wheels of a chariot crossing ancient roads, finally settling into that soft, concluding vowel that fades like an echo into silence. The very sound of the word carries within it a sense of mystery, of something precious that lies just beyond the reach of ordinary experience. The epic poems that preserved Aratta's memory were not composed in the hurried manner of our modern age, but with the patient rhythm of seasons, the careful attention of craftsmen who understood that they were working with materials more precious than gold or silver. These poet-scribes would spend years perfecting a single composition, adding layers of meaning like archaeologists in reverse, building up rather than digging down, creating structures of language that could hold the weight of human longing for the transcendent. Picture yourself now listening to one of these ancient poems being recited in the flickering light of oil lamps in a Sumerian temple. The words flow like music, each line connected to the next, not just by logic, but by rhythm, by sound, by the deeper patterns that govern how human consciousness moves from thought to thought, from image to image. The audience listens not just with their minds, but with their entire beings, allowing the poetry to work its ancient magic, transforming them from mere listeners into participants in the sacred story being told. In these poems, Aratta emerges not as a political entity to be conquered or a trading partner to be negotiated with, but as a mirror for the human soul's deepest aspirations. When King Enrakar sends his messages across the mountains, he is sending not just diplomatic communications, but prayers, longings, the cries of a heart that knows itself to be incomplete without connection to something greater and more beautiful than the ordinary world can provide. Feel the gentle weight of this understanding settling over you like a soft blanket woven from moonbeams and ancient wisdom. The poets who created these works understood something that we are perhaps only beginning to remember, that the purpose of language at its highest level is not simply to convey information, but to transform consciousness, to create bridges between the isolated individual and the vast community of all being. The goddess Inanna, in these ancient poems, speaks in a voice that is simultaneously utterly particular and completely universal. Her words carry the authority of divine truth, yet they resonate with the intimate familiarity of our own inner voice when it speaks to us in moments of deepest knowing. This is the miracle of truly great poetry. It manages to be both utterly specific and infinitely general, speaking to conditions that existed thousands of years ago while touching truths that remain as fresh as tomorrow's dawn doth rest now in the Yao. Flowing rhythm of these ancient verses, even though the original language is lost to us, and we must experience them through the careful translations of modern scholars. Something essential survives the journey across millennia and languages: the music beneath the words, the pattern of longing and fulfillment that governed the hearts of human beings in the dawn of civilization and continues to govern them still. Scribes who preserved these poems understood that they were not just creating literature, but maintaining a vital connection between their world and the realm of the sacred. Each time the poems were copied onto fresh clay, each time they were recited in the temples or told around evening fires, Aratta was made present again, renewed in human consciousness, kept alive not through archaeology or historical research, but through the simple miracle of remembered words carrying remembered truths from heart to heart across the generations. Imagine now that you yourself are one of these ancient preservers of memory, carefully copying out the sacred verses onto a new tablet, your hand moving with practiced precision as you transfer not just letters, but living symbols of eternal realities. With each word you inscribe, you feel yourself connected to the long chain of human beings who have served as guardians of these mysteries, keepers of the flame that illuminates the path between the everyday world and the realm of wonder. Memory of Aratta that these poems preserve is not the memory of historians, concerned with dates and political relationships and archaeological evidence. It is the memory of the heart, which knows that some truths are too important to be limited by questions of literal factual accuracy. The poets understood that Aratta's greatest reality lay not in any physical location, but in its power to awaken in human beings the recognition of their own capacity for transcendence, their own kinship with the divine. As you drift now between waking and sleeping, carried by the gentle current of these ancient words, feel yourself becoming part of this great chain of memory, this living tradition that has kept alive through all the changes of history, the knowledge that there are realms of being more beautiful and more real than anything the ordinary senses can perceive. You are not just listening to these stories, but becoming one of their guardians, one of the souls through whom their light continues to shine. The language of the Sumerian poets was concrete and immediate, filled with vivid images of mountains and rivers, of messengers and kings, of precious stones and skilled craftsmen. Yet through this very concreteness, they achieved something beyond the merely literal. They created a mythology that speaks directly to the mythic dimension of human experience, the part of us that knows itself to be both earthbound and starbound, both temporal and eternal. Let your breathing slow now to match the ancient rhythm of these verses, each inhalation drawing in something of their timeless wisdom, each exhalation releasing any sense of separation from the great community of seekers who have found in Aratta a symbol for their own deepest hopes and dreams. The words themselves become a bridge, carrying you gently across the vast expanses of time and space that seem to separate you from those ancient poets, until you realize that no separation ever truly existed. In preserving the memory of Aratta. Through their poetry, the Sumerians gave us something more valuable than historical information. They gave us a technology for transformation, a method for accessing states of consciousness that might otherwise remain forever beyond our reach. Their words are not merely words but keys, and as you allow them to work their gentle magic within you, doors begin to open that you never knew were there. In the deepening quiet of this night, as your body settles into the embrace of rest, and your mind begins to release its hold on the concerns of the day, we arrive at perhaps the most profound chapter of our journey together, the place where questions outnumber answers, where mystery deepens rather than resolves, and where the very act of not knowing becomes a doorway to a different kind of understanding altogether. Let yourself sink more deeply into comfort now, as we explore together the beautiful uncertainty that surrounds Aratta like morning mist around a distant mountain. There is something deeply soothing about acknowledging the limits of human knowledge, something that allows the soul to rest in ways that no amount of factual certainty ever could. Tonight, we discover that the questions themselves may be more valuable than any answers we might find. Picture yourself standing in a vast library that exists somewhere between dream and waking, its shelves stretching infinitely in all directions, filled with volumes that contain all the accumulated knowledge of human civilization. Yet as you reach for the section marked Aratta, you find that the shelves hold not definitive answers, but luminous question marks, each one glowing with its own soft light, each one opening onto vistas of wonder that no amount of research could ever fully explore. The scholars who have devoted their lives to understanding Aratta find themselves in the position of archaeologists working in reverse, not digging down through layers of accumulated evidence, but reaching upward into realms of possibility that seem to expand rather than contract with each new discovery. They ask themselves, did this kingdom truly exist in the physical world, with palaces of lapis lazuli and gardens where precious stones grew like fruit on trees? Or was it always what it appears to be now, a creation of human longing, a poem, made manifest in the collective imagination of a people who understood that some truths can only be expressed through the language of myth? Feel the gentle weight of this uncertainty settling around you like a soft shawl woven from starlight and ancient dreams. There is no urgency to solve these mysteries, no pressure to choose between competing theories or to arrive at conclusions that would close the door on further wondering. Instead, let yourself rest in the spacious not knowing that allows room for all possibilities to coexist in perfect harmony. Consider the strange comfort that comes from realizing that after nearly 5,000 years of human curiosity and investigation, Aratta remains as mysterious as ever. Modern archaeologists have proposed numerous locations. Perhaps it was the ancient civilization of Jiroft in southeastern Iran, with its spectacular artifacts and sophisticated metalwork. Maybe it lay in the Indus Valley, where Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro once flourished with their own mysterious script and advanced urban planning. Some suggest it might have been located in the mountains of Afghanistan or in the highlands of ancient Elam, or even that it was a composite memory of several different cultures that the Sumerians encountered in their trading expeditions. Each proposed solution seems to dissolve upon closer examination, like mirages that retreat as we approach them. The more precisely scholars attempt to pin down Aratta's location, the more elusive it becomes, as if the very act of seeking to reduce it to mere historical fact somehow misses the point of its existence entirely. Allow your breathing to slow now as we contemplate this beautiful paradox together. Perhaps the question, did Aratta really exist, is not the right question to ask. Perhaps the more illuminating inquiry is, why did the human heart need Aratta to exist? What does its persistent presence in our imagination tell us about the nature of human longing, about our eternal search for meaning and transcendence in a world that often seems to offer neither? Rest now in the understanding that some mysteries are meant to remain mysterious, not because they are unsolvable, but because their deepest value lies not in being solved, but in continuing to inspire wonder. Aratta serves as a reminder that the most important realities in human experience, love, beauty, the sense of the sacred, the longing for home, cannot be fully captured by any amount of archaeological evidence or historical documentation. The absence of Aratta's physical remains may itself be part of its teaching. In a world increasingly dominated by the demand for empirical proof and measurable outcomes, Aratta stands as a gentle reminder that the most precious things in life often leave no trace that can be weighed or measured or photographed. They exist in the realm of experience rather than objects, in the space between heartbeats rather than in any location that could be marked on a map. Picture yourself now as a traveler who has spent years searching for Aratta, following every possible clue, investigating every promising lead, only to discover that the journey itself has been the destination all along. The mountains you crossed in your searching, the rivers you forded, the strangers who offered you shelter and shared their stories around evening fires, these were not obstacles to overcome on your way to some final revelation, but were themselves the revelation, the living presence of what you sought made manifest in each moment of genuine seeking. Feel the deep peace that comes with this recognition settling into your bones, into the very rhythm of your breathing. You no longer need Aratta to be found because you have discovered that it was never lost. You no longer need it to be proven real because you have experienced its reality in ways that transcend any possible proof. The mystery has not been solved, but has instead dissolved into a greater mystery. The recognition that seeking and finding are not opposite activities, but are in fact the same activity seen from different angles. The Sumerian poets who first sang of Aratta understood this truth in ways that we are perhaps only beginning to remember. They were not concerned with providing their listeners with accurate geographical information or historical documentation. They were offering something far more valuable, a technology for transformation, a method for accessing parts of human experience that can only be approached through the doorway of story and symbol. In our modern age, we have become accustomed to thinking that knowledge consists primarily of facts that can be verified and information that can be stored in databases. Yet the mystery of Aratta reminds us that there are other kinds of knowing, the knowledge that comes through direct experience, through intuition, through the recognition of patterns that repeat across all scales of existence, from the movements of stars to the rhythms of the human heart. Let yourself drift now between questions and answers, between knowing and not knowing, finding rest in the spacious middle ground where mystery and understanding dance together in perfect harmony. The uncertainty that surrounds Aratta is not a problem to be solved, but a gift to be received, an invitation to remember that the most important journey is always the one that leads us more deeply into the mystery of our own being. Perhaps this is why Aratta has captured human imagination for so many millennia, not because it offers answers to our questions, but because it helps us discover better questions, questions that open us to dimensions of experience we never knew existed. In seeking Aratta, we discover that we are really seeking ourselves, seeking the part of us that knows itself to be both utterly unique and completely connected to everything else that exists. The scholars will continue their searching, and this too is part of the beauty of the mystery. Some will propose new locations, others will challenge existing theories, still others will argue that Aratta was purely mythological from the beginning. All of these perspectives contribute to the ongoing conversation, the living dialogue between human curiosity and the inexhaustible mystery of existence itself. But tonight, in this gentle space between day and night, between waking and sleeping, you are invited to rest in the understanding that goes beyond all scholarly debates and archaeological investigations. You are invited to experience Aratta not as a problem to be solved, but as a presence to be welcomed, not as a destination to be reached, but as a quality of awareness that is available in this very moment. As sleep begins to call to you now like A familiar friend extending an invitation to come home. Carry with you the peaceful recognition that life's greatest mysteries are not obstacles to understanding, but are themselves the deepest form of understanding available to the human heart. In embracing the mystery of Aratta, you embrace the mystery of your own existence, the beautiful uncertainty that makes each moment an adventure, each breath a small miracle, each dream a doorway into realms that no amount of waking knowledge could ever fully explore. The questions remain, suspended like stars in the vast night sky of consciousness, each one a point of light guiding you not toward final answers, but toward ever deeper appreciation of the magnificent mystery of being alive in a universe where places like Aratta can exist simultaneously in myth and reality, in history and imagination, in the ancient past and the eternal present of this very moment when you close your eyes and find yourself, at last, arriving home. In this final hour of our journey together, as the night reaches its deepest point and your body has found its perfect rest, let your imagination open like a flower blooming in moonlight. Release now any hold your mind still has on the familiar world of clocks and calendars, of daily routines and practical concerns. Tonight, in this sacred space between sleeping and waking, you are invited to step across the threshold of time itself and discover who you might have been, who you perhaps once were, in that golden age when Aratta first rose from the dreams of humanity into something approaching reality. Take a slow, deep breath and feel yourself being gently lifted by invisible hands, carried on currents of possibility back through the centuries, back through the millennia, until the modern world fades like a half-remembered dream, and you find yourself standing in a landscape that exists at the very dawn of human civilization, where the air itself shimmers with magic, and the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds is as thin as spider silk. You are no longer bound by the story of your current life, no longer limited by the circumstances and identities that usually define your days. Instead, you are free to explore what it might mean to have been a citizen of Aratta, to have lived in that realm where the goddess Inanna walked among mortals and the very stones sang with divine presence. Let this possibility settle around you like a garment woven from starlight and ancient dreams. Perhaps you were a messenger, chosen for your courage and integrity to carry communications between the great kings of distant lands. Feel the weight of the sealed clay tablet in your hands, its surface marked with cuneiform characters that contain not just political negotiations, but sacred poetry, mystical formulas that must be delivered with perfect precision. You have traveled for months across trackless deserts and over mountain passes where eagles nest, carrying within yourself not just a message, but a sacred trust. Your feet are dusty from countless miles of walking, your skin bronzed by sun, wind, your eyes bright with the wisdom that comes only to those who have seen the world from its highest peaks and lowest valleys. You know the names of every star in the sky, can read the language of clouds and the subtle signs that reveal where water might be found in the driest wasteland. You are no ordinary courier, but a bridge between worlds, a living connection between the realm of human ambition and divine possibility. As you rest now beside your campfire on some forgotten mountain slope, watching the flames dance against the endless canopy of stars, you remember your home in Aratta with a longing so deep it makes your heart ache with beautiful sorrow. You remember the palace gates of polished obsidian, their surfaces reflecting the light of eternal lamps like captured fragments of heaven. You remember the gardens where fountains of pure silver water flowed between beds of flowers that bloomed in colors for which no names existed, their fragrance carrying prayers directly to the realm of the gods. Or perhaps you were one of Aratta's legendary craftsmen, your hands blessed by the goddess herself with the ability to work precious metals and gemstones into objects of such beauty that even the angels wept when they beheld them. Feel the smooth coolness of lapis lazuli beneath your fingers as you shape it with tools that seem to work more through intention than through mere physical force. Each piece you create is not simply decorative, but serves as a focal point for meditation, a window through which the divine light can enter the world of form. Your workshop occupies a quiet corner of the great palace, its walls lined with shelves that hold treasures beyond counting, gold dust that glows with its own inner fire, pearls that contain the essence of moonbeams, crystals that sing in harmonies, too subtle for ordinary ears to detect. Yet you know that the true treasure is not in these materials, but in the act of creation itself, in the moment when raw matter is transformed through love and skill into something that can lift the human heart toward recognition of its own divine nature. Let yourself sink deeper now into this ancient identity, feeling how different your relationship to time and space becomes when you live in a world where the sacred and mundane are not separate categories, but are different aspects of a single, unified reality. In Aratta, every sunrise is a celebration, every meal a communion, every conversation an opportunity to exchange not just information but wisdom, blessing, recognition of the divine spark that lives within every being. You remember the great festivals when the entire kingdom would gather in the central plaza to hear the sacred poems recited by masters, whose voices could make the very air shimmer with meaning. These were not simply entertainments, but ritual, occasions when the community renewed its connection to the sources of its power and purpose. As the ancient words flowed over the assembled crowd, you felt yourself part of something far greater than your individual existence, part of a collective, dreaming that was calling into being new possibilities for human consciousness. The work you did in Aratta was never merely work, but was always also worship, always also play, always also love. Whether you were tending the sacred gardens, copying manuscripts in the great library, preparing food for the temple festivals, or carrying messages across the dangerous mountain passes, you understood that every action was an opportunity to serve something greater than yourself, while simultaneously serving your own deepest development. Feel now the quality of rest that came to you in that ancient life, the deep peace that settled over Aratta each evening as the last light faded from the western mountains and the first stars appeared, like jewels scattered across dark velvet. You would lie in your simple chamber, its walls decorated with murals that told the stories of gods and heroes, and listen to the night sounds of the kingdom settling into sleep, the distant music of fountains, the soft voices of night blooming, flowers opening to receive the moon's blessing, the whisper of wind through the great towers where the wise ones kept their eternal vigil. In those moments before sleep claimed you, you would often feel visited by dreams that seemed to come not from your own mind, but from some vast collective memory, visions of other times and places where the same divine principles that governed Aratta had found expression in different forms. You saw great temples rising from jungle clearings, wise teachers gathering disciples beside sacred rivers, cities of light that existed in dimensions parallel to but separate from the ordinary physical world. Sometimes you dreamed of a time, far in the future, when the kingdom of Aratta would exist primarily in story and symbol, when its great palaces would have dissolved back into the earth from which they came, but its essential spirit would live on in the hearts of seekers who had never heard its name, but who carried within themselves the same longing for beauty, truth, and connection that had called Aratta into being in the first place. Now, as you rest in the deepest part of this night, allow yourself to feel the bridge that connects your ancient self with your present being. Feel how the wisdom you gained in that distant time has never truly left you, but has been waiting patiently within your soul. For moments like this, when the veils between past and present become transparent and you can remember who you have always been beneath all the temporary roles and identities you have worn. The messenger who carried sacred truths across impossible distances lives on in every moment when you choose to speak words that heal rather than wound, when you offer comfort to someone who is struggling, when you serve as a bridge between different worlds of understanding. The craftsman who transformed raw materials into objects of divine beauty continues his work every time you approach any task with reverence and attention. Every time you recognize that even the most mundane activities can become occasions for the sacred when performed with love and awareness. Feel your breathing slow now to match the eternal rhythm that governed life in Aratta, a rhythm that honored both action and rest, both effort and surrender, both the individual journey and the collective dream. In that ancient kingdom, sleep was understood not as a mere biological necessity, but as a sacred journey in itself, a nightly pilgrimage to the realm of pure possibility, where the soul could remember its connection to the source of all life. As sleep begins to claim you now, carry with you the profound recognition that Aratta was never really a place you visited, but a quality of consciousness you embodied, never really a destination you reached, but a way of being you remembered. The golden gates that marked its boundaries exist within your own heart, always open, always welcoming you home to the part of yourself that knows no separation from the divine source of all existence. The treasures of Aratta that you once helped to create and guard are treasures you carry still, the capacity for wonder, the ability to recognize beauty in unexpected places, the courage to journey into unknown territories, guided only by love, and faith, the wisdom that comes from understanding that every soul you meet is both your teacher and your student, both your mirror and your doorway to deeper truth. Let your final waking thought be this gentle recognition. The reason the story of Aratta has called to you across all these centuries is not because it represents some lost golden age that existed only in the distant past, but because it represents a quality of being that is your birthright, a way of living that is always available to you in this very moment, in this very breath, in this very heartbeat that carries you gently across the threshold into dreams where Aratta's gates stand eternally open, eternally welcoming you home. Sleep now, ancient traveler, noble craftsman, guardian of sacred mysteries. Sleep and dream of the kingdom that lives not in any map, but in the geography of the awakened heart, not in any history book, but in the eternal present, where love and wisdom dance together in celebration of the magnificent mystery of being alive, being conscious, being you. The whispers of Aratta continue in your breathing, in your dreaming, in the very fact of your existence as a bridge between worlds, a living reminder that the most beautiful kingdoms are those we carry within us, those we create together, those we discover anew each time we remember how to see the world through eyes of wonder, how to touch it with hands of love, how to inhabit it with hearts that know themselves to be at home in the infinite mystery of what is. And now, dear listener, our journey draws to a close, but like all true stories, this one does not truly end. It simply softens, like the last notes of a sacred song echoing through a stone temple, like the glow of the sun just before it slips behind the mountains, like the feeling in your chest after waking from a dream so vivid you're unsure whether you lived it or only imagined it. You've walked far tonight, not in miles or steps, but in soul you followed the winds eastward, beyond Uruk, beyond what can be charted on any map, to a kingdom that may never have existed, in stone or brick, but has always existed in longing. Aratta, a name sung in the world's first poems, a place where divine light was said to gather, a mirror, perhaps, of the human spirit at its most sacred and unspoiled. And now, as you lie here, safe, still, deeply at rest, you may notice something has shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a river changing course, ever so slightly after a long season of silence. That shift is the gift of the journey. You may not remember every detail of what we've shared tonight, the names, the myths, the mountains. That's okay, because the truth of Aratta was never in its facts, but in its feeling. It lives not in memory, but in resonance, that deep, almost imperceptible vibration that lingers long after a story ends. And if you feel that now, a kind of inner quiet, a loosening, a warmth, then Aratta has done its work, not it has spoken. Not to your mind, but to your soul. There is something ancient in you, listener, something older than your name, older than this moment, something that remembers the stars as they were 5,000 years ago. That ancient self has walked with us tonight, silently, patiently, step by step, as we return to the place where imagination and divinity first touched. In Sumer, they believed that words had power, real, tangible power, that a name could shape reality, that a story could shift the course of the heavens. Perhaps that's why Aratta, though never conquered, never excavated, still lives, because people kept speaking it, because poets kept dreaming it, because listeners like you kept feeling it. Let yourself feel it now, without needing to define or explain. Let the name Aratta settle once more into your chest, like a stone dropped gently into water. Feel its ripples moving outward, subtle, slow, sacred. You are not simply ending a story. You are carrying it. You are becoming its next teller, its next dreamer, its next silent keeper in the night. And this, perhaps, is the real meaning behind all old myths, that they are not meant to be studied, but inhabited, not dissected, but trusted. They are doorways, not destinations. And tonight, you walked through such a door. You passed through the myths of kings and gods, through the verses of Enmerkar and the journey of Lugalbanda, through the golden silence of a kingdom no historian can prove, but that your soul already knew. Because Aratta isn't a place you go to. It's a place you remember. It's the garden of your imagination before it was paved over by doubt. It's the voice that whispers to you in dreams when the world is gone. Quiet, it's the sacred somewhere else we all carry inside, and sometimes glimpse in art, in silence, in beauty, in breath. So, as the last echoes of tonight's story fade into the night, I invite you not to leave Aratta, but to let it stay with you. Let it live in the way you soften before sleep, in the way you pause when you see a star that seems older than time, in the way you feel when you hear a story that makes you forget everything else for a while. That, too, is Aratta, a kingdom of wonder, not the place where words become temples, the space between waking and dreaming where gods still walk, and messengers still journey with hope in their hands. Rest now. Let your breathing grow slow and deep. Let your body melt into the surface that holds you. Let your thoughts drift, like clouds across an ancient sky. You are not alone. You are not lost. You are exactly where you are meant to be, at the quiet edge of a tale so old it has no beginning and no end. If sleep finds you now, let it take you gently. Let it carry you not away from the story, but deeper into it, into the mountains where the priests of Aratta once sang their prayers, into the golden light that spilled from its jewel-covered gates, into the silent knowing that somewhere, some part of you has always belonged there. And perhaps, when morning comes, you will not remember this story word for word, but you may rise with a calm you didn't have before, a stillness, a subtle shift. That is Aratta's gift, and you received it simply by listening. So sleep now, dear traveler. The stars are bright, the winds are soft, and the whispers of Aratta are now part of you. Good night.